We are 2 weeks away from this year's JetPower, which after not having one last year, everyone is super excited to be heading out there. The problem is, 2 years ago, Carlos promised an F5 in early November. It's now 2 years later, 2 weeks before JetPower, and he's about to arrive with that F5, which I have to paint and build in time for JetPower. It looks like it's going to be an extremely busy 2 weeks prior to JetPower. So I've cleared up the workshop, ready to get going, because I know I'm going to be living in here basically for the next 2 weeks. Except it isn't 2 weeks, because Carlos has to drive the plane up to Germany before JetPower, starting on Tuesday. That gives us a week and a half. So it's time to forget the fancy lights and the beautiful backdrops. It's going to be a rough and raw video. We've got a lot of work to do. And just like that, in perfect timing, albeit 2 years late, Carlos is here. Ooh. It's a flash, ultra flash. So we've just done a live video unboxing the F5. You can check that out on the channel. So we just calculated we have 7 days basically of paint work. That gives us a spare 2 days in which to do any necessary touch-ups just to get her ready for paint. Now it is basically ready to go. However, there are just a couple of places where, as this is the first one, it does need a few minor touch-ups. So, time to get cracking with the filler and with the sandpaper. First part is the nose section. So it's the duck nose. So we need to sand the joint and give a quick sand everywhere, just so that the paint will stick nicely to the surface. So that's what it looks like before we do anything. And then that's what it looks like once we've done. So we've got rid of that center line and everywhere's had a quick sand. Well, that's half the nose done, just everything else left to do. So we've not done much filming, but we have done a lot of sanding. It's about 2 in the morning, sanded everywhere, also done some filler and given a first layer of sandable primer absolutely everywhere. So everywhere that's had any kind of an issue. Now admittedly, a lot of these issues are something that would normally have been sorted at the factory. This is still a prototype. Future versions, I'm assured, will be absolutely ready to go straight out from the factory. But it's been a long day. Workshop's no longer looking as nice and tidy as it was quite a few hours ago, but that'll do for today. Let that all dry, get sanding again in the morning. And good morning on day 2. It's now Sunday. Today we need to finish everything related to sanding, filling and sandable primer. So it's going to be a dusty day, but hopefully we're not going to need to do too much more filling than what we already did yesterday. Let's get to it. So that's the first wing now sanded. So we've got that sandable primer sanded down, and we've keyed the entire wing using these 3M superfine sanding pads. So it's ready to receive paint. Just need to clean it all off, and this particular wing will be good to go. Just need to do the same now to the other one and everything else. And that's another wing ready for paint. But as you can see, I've added these little bits of masking tape. They're just reminders for later where I need to add still a little bit extra filler or sandable primer. So we're going to finish all the surfaces, well, the whole plane really, get it ready for paint, and then we'll make 1 batch of filler and 1 batch of sandable primer and just go over anywhere that has masking tape. So we've got most of the plane now sanded and prepped, minus those few touch-ups. Same goes for the fuzz, which still needs the general sanding. It's now lunchtime, so it's taken quite a while to do all the sanding, which isn't quite finished yet. And we've just installed these Not really sure what these are really on the full size, but we've had to glue those on because they're not in the mould. So that is fun. We'll have to add some filler in there as well to match that up. And then we've got the same thing over here on the nose, where I'm not sure if this is something to do with antennas or lights or something like that. So I've had to glue those on both sides as well. This one seems to have joined in a little bit nicer with some of the glue sticking out. So we'll still have to sand it, but hopefully won't need as much filler. We're running out of time for this as we need to get painting tomorrow, so let's get back to it. We'll have to load more filling and a heck of a lot of sanding. We've now got all the surfaces hopefully ready to receive paint. Just need to clean them all up. It's still daylight out, so hopefully we may even still be able to get some parts with their first layer of paint on them. Well, we still need to touch up a few points on the fuzz, but before it gets too dark, let's get some colour on the wings and see some actual progress. So we're going to wash everything down just with some alcohol, get it nice and clean, get some grey on. Sorry there hasn't been all too much footage of what's been going on so far, but as I think we said at the beginning of the video, we are really up against the clock on this one, and there's still a heck of a lot to do. So we're not wasting any time, and we just have to get this done. And we're making the best video we can in that short amount of time. On this occasion, the priority is getting it finished. It's not doing the video. Hi, Future Martin here. Unfortunately, that's about as far as we got with regards to filming while painting. Just didn't have enough time in this 1 week to do all the painting and keep talking to camera and filming. So now that we've got a rather empty workshop, even though it looks like a bomb's gone off, the plane's just left with Carlos. So here's an overview of how the rest of the week went. So as you just saw, on Sunday afternoon evening, we painted a few loose components in grey, and we finished touching up a few locations on the fuzz that still needed a bit more filler and a bit more sanding. That was it for Sunday. We're now down our full first day. Monday, first day of the week, also means first day back at work. So we couldn't spend the entire day working on the plane as we would have liked. So once I finished work, get home, we got in the workshop, we sanded down what was left on the fuzz, and we painted the grey on the fuzz and the red on the bottom of the wings. At this point, it's starting to look more like my intended colour scheme. Tuesday, work again in the morning, and then in the afternoon, back in the workshop, time to flip the fuzz upside down, get the red on the underneath, and start adding a little bit more detail to the top of the wings. And at this point, we are making progress, but we're also eating through time. Tuesday evening is also the day that my good friend and electrician came round and put up a new outside light for me, so it's nice and bright and we can actually continue painting in the dark. Otherwise, there's no way that we're getting this thing done if we can only paint during daytime and still having to go to work in the morning. By Wednesday, we're feeling quite optimistic. We've finished sanding, we've got the first layers of paint down, and it's starting to look like the right colour scheme. Now, the issue is we've done all the big jobs. Now we have to start with all the smaller jobs, the small lines, the badges, the flags, etc. Now, that doesn't seem to sound too bad, but it eats into so much time because everything is a different colour, everything needs to be masked off, and everything has to be perfect, otherwise you go back a step. So in the whole of Wednesday, we basically did all the small details, all the small lines, and the golden colour tailpipes on the back of the fuzz. For Thursday, all we've got left to do now is apply all of the water slides, all the decals onto the plane, and then we have to let them dry overnight before we lacquer the plane. So it's a long day of tiny little finicky stickers, trying to make sure they're in the same places on both sides, trying to make sure they're in the right locations, as scale as possible. But again, it seemed like a good day. Friday was crunch day. It was an easy day because all that we had to do was clear coat the plane, lacquer it. It's also the day when things can go terribly wrong. So we got everything outside, prepped everything, and very carefully sprayed the whole plane with a satin finish. So not quite matte and definitely not shiny kind of finish, ready to leave it overnight so that over the weekend, those 2 days that we've got left before everyone comes back to pick up the plane, we can do all the weathering, which in theory is relatively quick. We'll find out. So Saturday rolls round, the plane is looking great. We actually were able to get to bed at a reasonable time last night for the first time all the week, and the satin finish is looking amazing. Now, all we need to do is dirty it up to do the weathering. Now, in theory, this is done with oil paints. I'd heard that just dabbing the rivet lines or screw lines would be enough to rub them off. All you needed to do was leave it for about an hour and then rub backwards in the same direction as the airflow. Sounded easy, sounded too easy to be true, turned out it was. So after losing the entire morning just applying these small amounts of oil paint onto the surfaces of the model, starting with the underside in case we made a mess of it, it wasn't drying. It really wasn't drying. And if I tried to wipe back, I was just removing absolutely everything. So this is when I spoke to our good friend Phil Knoll at Pinnacle Aviation in the UK. Master artist, especially when it comes to everything weathering and, well, anything plane really. He told me that the trick that he uses is basically just to mix the oil paint with some terps, make it a nice liquid consistency, so kind of runny like water, and just absolutely load the plane with this colour. So that's exactly what we did, and it is terrifying to see that after having spent a week in making everything as perfect as possible given the time frame that we had, you're now painting entire surfaces and eventually the entire plane in basically black. You then immediately wipe it off backwards, and indeed the first rub back seems to remove about half of the colour, comes off really easily because it's still very liquid, but then what's left underneath is drying. So you then have to continue removing, and every time you go over it you're taking off a little bit more. Especially if using a clean rag, then every time you go over it's a little bit more faint. So you then have to do this for the entire model. By this point, by the time we come to the evening and we're halfway through, we've got half the plane done, my arm is literally falling off. I just cannot do this anymore. Thankfully, my good friend that put up my light, who isn't an aero modeler, knew that I was struggling and offered to come round and help. So with his help, between us, we flipped the plane over, we did the other half of the plane, and all in all, she was looking great. Now, we then needed to leave it to dry again overnight before lacquering, as we don't want the thinners from the lacquer to affect the paint. So with the airplane really nicely weathered, really heavily weathered, probably overly weathered, in order to hide a few, shall we say, irregularities that wouldn't normally be there had we had that little extra time to do some more filling, some more sanding and some more prep work before starting painting. Well, the plane's looking great. It's Sunday evening, really early morning of Sunday, but we figure it's best to let it dry fully before trying to lacquer it. The plane's basically ready to go, so Sunday was a chill day, leaving everything for Monday. Monday afternoon, as soon as I got home from work, the only job left now was to clear coat the plane from top to bottom, lock in all that weathering, lock in all that oil paint, and have it dry overnight in time for Carlos and his guys to come here and pick it up, take it up to JetPower. So Monday we did exactly that. Clear coated the bottom, clear coated the top, brought it back in here, and finally had a good night's sleep. So it's D-Day. I've rushed home because Carlos is on his way here, should be here any minute now, to pick up the F5, now finished, painted, lacquered, ready to go to JetPower. They're driving straight from here to Germany, where we'll catch up with them on Thursday, ready for the show. JetPower time.
Y ahora dale una vuelta y arreglar el motor. Ahí.
Vale, la tengo, sí. Y ahora la otra.
Por aquí.
Esta sí, todavía sí nos daba, vale.
There goes the F5 and the FC1. See you in JetPower. Well, I was going to say that's a rather empty looking workshop, but it needs some tidying up for that first. Missing the FC1 and the F5 that's been here for a week, but time to tidy up. I think some sleep first though. And after that, I look forward to meeting you all hopefully at JetPower. Make sure to stop by and say hi, like, subscribe if you aren't already so you catch up, especially if you're not going. I'll see you there.